Wonderful to see all of you here. As you're here, this session will also be recorded for those who signed up were not able to come at this moment. Really wonderful that you've been able to come here and join us, maybe very early in the morning in Latin America, or perhaps later in the evening in Asia. So my name is Annelieke Dauma. I'm head of strategy at Both Ends, and I will be facilitating this webinar. So please, as I said, make sure that you have the right language selected, and we will make sure to try and speak clear and slowly to make the life of the interpreters easier. So the session will be recorded, and it will be great, if possible, to get a sense who's joining us, to provide your name and your organization or affiliation, as well as the country in which you're based in the chat, so we know who's in the room. So just your name, organization, and the country in which you're based. So let's start. The Dare to Trust initiative that we started in 2023, and more generally discuss the value and the potential of unconditional trust-based finance. So you will see the agenda. We can put it up, the agenda for today. I'm just asking Mariette to do that. We will have a number of speakers in the beginning. So Karin van Bokstel, director of Both Ends, will shortly introduce Both Ends and the important role of trust in the way we work with partners across the world. Then Maaike Hendricks, who has been coordinating this initiative, will dive into the initiative itself, what we did, what results we have seen, and what lessons we have learned and would like to share. And then we're very happy to have Cheryl and Angela here from the Philippines and Bolivia, who have been part of this initiative to share their experiences firsthand. And then there's a room for questions and answers. So during the presentations, please share all your questions in the chat. We will keep an eye on the chat, and then we make sure that we accommodate these questions in the Q&A. And then the last half hour, we move more into the broader question of what are the opportunities, what are the obstacles, and what are the ways forwards when it comes to unconditional funding and trust-based finance. And we kick this off with an interview with Marieke Rodehuis of the Dutch Postcode Lottery. So yes, let's start. I would very much like to give the floor now to Karin van Bokstel, to introduce Both Ends and the role of trust in our work. Karin, can I give you the floor?
Yes, definitely. Thank you very much, Annelieke, for kicking this off, and thank you all for being...
One moment, Karin. We have
Yes.
a problem with the chat, so I'm trying to get the chat up and running. So sorry, everyone. I'm working on it. Okay.
Okay, I can continue in the meantime.
Yes, of course, of course.
Okay. Okay, so as I was saying, welcome to all of you being here in this webinar. And I just had another conversation this morning about trust-based finance and how promising it is and how effective it is, but also how much it lies at the heart of international solidarity and environmental justice, to which we all and a lot of us are committed to. Yeah, so happy to be here and happy that you join us on our journey of trust. We have been able to do that with support of the Dutch Postcode Lottery, which is definitely a great supporter of trust-based finance as well. And I would like to start as well with showing or speaking about or sharing why trust is so important. Why is that trust important in the financing or in the work that we're doing? And I think mainly looking at how the world looks today and looking at a world being increasingly fractured by geopolitical tensions or the economic uncertainty or the social divisions, trust has actually become one of the most scarce and also at the same time one of the most valuable resources. And the meaningful change which is needed in environmental justice will only come from the grassroots, will only come from many of you who are here as well. From women, from youth, from indigenous people who are shaping the climate solutions in practice and while they are also resisting the false solutions. And I think these people are actually the true drivers of transformation. And these are also the ones who need trust, who deserve trust at all levels in order for these grassroots solutions to really gain traction and to be supported as well by actors in the world. And this trust ranges needs to be present at all levels. It ranges from knowledge exchange to strategic collaboration to funding relationships to different elements of the relationships that we're in. I think that one of the reports that have been written on trust-based finance is the one on the Mackenzie Scott giving of the last couple of years. And one of the numbers that was striking to me was that 52% of all foundation leaders believe that their foundation should provide more larger, multi-year, unrestricted support than it currently does. But at the same time, it cites various barriers to doing so. What that shows to me is that trust-based finance is a lot of funders are very committed to trust-based finance, but the actual how do you do that and how can you commit to that is still the main question. And I think that is also the most interesting question to address. But to continue for now, I'd also like to share a bit about what trust means to both ends and who both ends is for those of you who don't know both ends yet. We are an environmental justice organization working towards ensuring a powerful civil society globally. In doing so, we collaborate with more than 500 partner organizations worldwide to amplify the voices of women, of youth, of indigenous people, of local communities, and aiming to strengthen the respect for human rights and transforming unjust systems of power. In doing this, we work on a couple of environmental issues, key environmental issues such as land and water use, land and water governance, biodiversity, climate change, energy. But we also work on the key systems that profoundly affect them, specifically trade, for instance, financial flows, and extractivism, because that is where we believe that power is being shaped, and changing power relations is essential to really ensure that environmental justice. We started off as an organization, as both ends, about 35 years ago, about connecting environmental movements around the world. And that was actually the core of what we were doing at the time. It was also a time without internet, a totally different world than we know it now. And we work with these environmental movements to exchange knowledge, to strategize together, to share information in a mutual way. And trust was at that point very much at the heart of all these collaborations. Without trust, there wouldn't be any exchange of information or openness to really strategize together. And throughout the years, that trust became at the core, but we also developed other ways of working in the relationships that we have with partners over the world. One is that our role as strategic advocacy ally for partners increased and gained more traction. Their agenda is key on how we work in the equal partnerships, in the advocacy agenda that we're doing. And we each play a role depending on the position and the sphere of influence that we're having. For instance, both ends has an larger sphere of influence in the Netherlands at European Union level, while collaborating with, for instance, organizations in Senegal. Their sphere of influence is perhaps more directed towards Senegal and African Union or the African Development Bank, for instance. So all of this being put together shows that trust is very much essential in this strategic advocacy that we started doing more as well. We also increasingly took up a role in funding partners. We do that only when we see that there is no possibility or limited possibility to directly fund civil society groups, movements in the Global South. And this funding role also posed some challenges or questions or moments for reflection for both ends, in which we came to the conclusion that we want this funding to be based on the principles of solidarity and supporting the goals of systemic change in environmental justice. We have had in the last couple of years quite a lot of initiatives, such as the Global Alliance on Green and Gender Action, or the collaboration with DOB Ecology, or the Yokawala Hunter Initiative supporting young environmental leaders. Where we could put this into practice, this funding role. All these roles that both ends has been taking the last couple of years actually also made us very aware of power, made us very aware of how important trust is, and that is why we embarked on various processes to ensure that trust and balanced power relations remains at the heart of the relations that we have with partner. And as you can see on the slide, one of the examples of how we actually did that, how we put trust in practice, is by the examination of power process. This was initiated to understand how both ends holds power and how partners experience equity and power in their relationship with both ends, as well as to learn how we can better share that power. Because power is there, we cannot neglect it, but we can learn from it, we can reflect on it and learn from it. We did this by commissioning consultants from the Black Lives Matter movement with this question of understanding. We didn't do it ourselves, because if we would ask the question to us partners, obviously the answer might be biased, or there would be a strong likelihood that it would be biased. We were very happy that after the process, when we heard the outcomes of the whole process, that a majority of the partners describe both ends as an international mission-aligned advocacy partner. So really that strategic collaboration at the heart of what we do. And many do not see both ends only as a funder or a donor. And I think that's also definitely showing what role we have. It also showed where we can improve in terms of transparency, in terms of contacts with partner organization, and that is also the things that we're currently implementing in our organization and what we're learning from again. Another example of putting trust in practice for us was also setting up a system of care in which we, due to the changing environment and where threats and insecurity becomes much more apparent every day, to explore and pilot the ways in which partners facing threats as a result of their environmental and their human rights work, how these partners can be supported in their efforts to build protection, to strengthen systems of care, practices of care, systems of healing, and to sustain their work and also guarantee collective future. That's the system of care. Another example is how we've been advocating, as I mentioned before, for trust-based finance to be implemented in funding. So in funds in philanthropy, by bilateral funding towards bilateral donors, but also towards funds, climate funds, for instance, the Green Climate Funds, where we actually advocate for the money which is available in these funds, in these institutions, larger institutions, which are primarily, which tend to finance primarily bigger organizations, bigger institutions, multilateral sometimes, and not grassroots. So we have been advocating for these funds, for the Green Climate Fund, for instance, or the Global Environmental Facility, so that financing ends up in the hands of really grassroots people and people who hold the climate solutions in their own hands. And of course, if you can move to the next slide. Yes, and of course, the last initiative, the latest initiative, not the last initiative, but the latest initiative is, of course, Dare to Trust, which brings us even a step further in our journey on daring to trust and trusting and trust-based collaboration and trust-based financing. And this is where my colleague Maaike will share a lot more about the Dare to Trust journey that we had so far.
Thank you so much, Karin. Very clear on this overview on the various ways in which we already advocate for trust-based finance and access to funding, and also address trust and power in our own collaboration. I've seen in the beginning there were some issues with the chat, but hopefully it all works now. And I do see already many of you sharing their name and organization and the country in which you're based. So please do so if you have not done so. And if there's any problems, just put it in the chat. So Maaike, up to you. Can I give you the floor? Can't hear you.
Yeah, now my microphone is working.
Okay.
Hello, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm very sorry that I cannot see you in this type of webinar, but I know you're there. So hello, everyone. I'm very happy to share with you some of the experiences and the insights that we have with our Dare to Trust initiative. I must say I'm well aware of the fact that we are not the only one and not the first one who have been doing this, working with this model of funding based on trust. We know that there are many initiatives and foundations and organizations, especially, oh, my presentation is gone. Mayette, can you please bring it up again?
Working on it.
Okay, so we're not the first one and the only one, but unfortunately, we have never been able to start this this type of initiative because we were very reliant on the conditions of the funders that are supporting us. So when we received this grant from the Dutch Postal Lottery, we were very happy that we would be able to pilot this this type of initiative for both ends. I want to share with you that this project, this initiative Dare to Trust, is very dear to my heart. I've been working for a long time at both ends. I've been working with partner organizations for a long time, and I really cherish the type of bonds that we created. I have visited many partners, we have traveled together, we have visited the communities they work with, we have done campaigns together, we've been to international meetings. So I'm so happy that with this core group of partners of both ends, we were able to start this type of funding based on the relationships that we already created. So for me, it was not so much the question like, can we do this as both ends? Will this project work? But for me, the question was more about what will the women do with these grants when they have the opportunity and the freedom to just make choices and prioritize their own needs and their own wishes. And this is one of the things I like to share with you in this presentation. Please, next slide. Mayette? Yay!
I will start the video now.
Oh, the video first. Okay, thank you.
Eu tô fazendo novas amizades.
Okay, so you have seen already a little bit about the projects that the grants were used for. I want to go quickly into the process a little bit. Why did we start Dare to Trust? Well, many of you will recognize that the problem with most funding mechanisms is that they have a lot of administrative requirements, like proposals, reports, criteria, indicators, visiting consultants, and all that. And also, probably you all know that these relationships between funders and the receivers of the grants is often with a lot of imbalance of power. And in the Dare to Trust initiative, we try a little bit to counter that by giving grants to our partners with no conditions, no proposals, no reports, and just rely on the long-term relationships that we have built over time with our partners. And if you look at Dare to Trust, you can see it as a chain of trust where all the different actors have their own role to play. For example, the National Postcode Lottery provided the grants with very few conditions to both ends in the Netherlands. We then distributed the grants to our partner organizations and made sure that we had very minimal contracts where no conditions were put in. The partner organizations, which were mostly NGOs or socio-environmental small grants funds, they then know the community-based organizations in their network. So they already have long-term relationships with them. So they re-granted the grant to these local organizations of women environmental human rights defenders and their communities. Next one, please. Mayet? Yes. So the goal of our Dare to Trust initiative was to support the work of women environmental human rights defenders. And the reason we choose this particular group is that these women defenders are part of the network in our program, which we call GAGA, the Global Alliance for Green and Gender Action. These are part of the network. These are the women human rights defenders that we support because of the situation they are in. They are fighting for their rights over land, over water, over a clean environment, often in very violent situations where they have to campaign against big projects of infrastructure, mining, palm oil, and other agribusinesses. And the organizations we work with shared back with us that these women really do need support, not only for the advocacy work, but also for their livelihoods, for their day-to-day living. And we decided to support these women in this project. And our second goal was to share the insights of our initiative with funders, with policymakers, with grant-making institutions, so that anyone who would be interested to learn about this, maybe even experiment, also start this type of projects, that we could share this information with you. Next one, please. And this is a short overview of the process. In 2022, we received a grant from the Dutch Postcode Lottery. Then we started the process of asking a couple of people from our network that we call an advisory committee to help us shaping the project and also ask for their advice how to do this. And we selected 14 partners in 3 continents to give the grants to. And they each received 25,000 euros, plus an extra amount of about 1,600 euros. And we asked them to share back about the work that they would be doing. And they could choose themselves how to share back to us. So not in a formal report, but just any way they wanted. Then in 2023, these grants were distributed and the partners started the projects. In 2023 and 24, we regularly had check-ins with the partners when we met them or when we saw them in the countries or online. And we even had a meeting in between where it happened that most of the partners were in the Netherlands for another meeting. In 24, they shared back the stories about their projects, and now in this year, 25, we are sharing the outcomes and the learnings with people who are interested to hear about it. Next one, please. So for the selection of the partners, we looked in our partner network, selecting partners who share the same vision and the same agenda like both ends does in Asia, Africa, and Latin America, with whom we have a long-term strategic cooperation, who we know well, and who we also know can provide long-term support to the community-based organizations. Next. So these are the 14 partners that we asked to be part of this initiative. 2 of them are anonymous, unfortunately, because of the situation they're working in. Next one, please. I want to share a little bit about due diligence, because this is a question that we often get from donor organizations or foundations who are asking us, but how does it work? How can you monitor that the money is spent well, that there is no fraud, how do you check the results? And one of the things that we say is that the due diligence we do not during the projects or afterwards, but we do before the project starts, because we base our project on these long-term relations, and that is what we invest in over time. We did have initial talks, like I said, to an advisory group and to all the partners to collect their initial thoughts and ideas, and also to talk about the communication strategy. And we did regular check-ins with the partners. Next one. So to share a bit about the outcomes, I will share some pictures here, but I also would like to revert to the special magazine we wrote about this initiative, where you can find a summary of the projects that the partners implemented, but also links to reports and videos, to a podcast, to a radio show. So I invite you all to have a look at that magazine. If you look at the project, there's an enormous variety. Some people worked on sustainable agriculture and forest projects, including non-timber forest products and forest-based enterprises, processing units. Then there was an agroecology lab. There are many places to learn and to share with communities around them. There were projects on water and energy. Many new businesses were started up. Next one, please. And then also we noticed that part of the grants were spent still on activities for advocacy, on capacity strengthening of the own organization or the community-based organization. And it was also very important for the partners to spend some of the money on creating communal places and safe spaces where women human rights defenders could come together and talk and share their experiences and heal. The physical and mental health was very important, and as you will see in the magazine, you can see examples on how the grants were also used for activities in this field, as well as on emergency aid. Next one. So I want to share with you some of the insights and the lessons that we learned from this Dare to Trust initiative. What we can see is if you give grants based on trust and you see what the women are doing with the money, you can see that the women defenders are experts of their own reality and they really know best what is needed. The partner organizations were working in different regions, different circumstances, different contexts. So the projects were also very different. Some of the NGOs supported 3 community-based organizations, and others supported 63 individual women in these activities that they selected themselves. The women organizations organized really nice meetings to talk about how to spend the money, to decide with listening circles, with open talks, and this led to really an enormous variety of initiatives and activities. Next one. We can also see that when you put trust in women, they get control over the decisions that they make, and they develop strong leadership and confidence. This is what the partners shared back with us, that it was really so important to freely think and make choices, and to be flexible, that if they make choices and for some reason they had to change, that they had the freedom to do so. And they empowered themselves and freed themselves from influential men in the community. And most of all, what really struck me is that they've shared back with us that this type of funding gave them hope. Like I said before, parts of the grants were used for safety and for healing, because most of these women environmental defenders, they need safety, they need basic livelihood support, but they also need a space to breathe and to heal from the violence and from the harm done to them. And collective care, sanctuaries, and safe spaces are very essential to these women, and they were allowed to spend some of this money for these type of activities, and we were so happy that we were able to provide that opportunity. Next one. We can also see, if you look at the magazine, that if you ask people to share back in the way they choose, that it brings out a lot of creativity. There was a scrapbook made by one of the partners. There were videos, there were photo reports, a podcast, there was a radio show, and it's all very lively and very interesting to see. Next one. And something that I think would interest a lot of foundations and donors is that an initiative like Dare to Trust is also efficient and sustainable, because we noticed that trust also breeds trust, as one of these quotes from one of the partners says. Like, if you really trust an organization or a woman, they will do their best to be accountable. They will do their best to spend the money in the right way. And we also saw that it was very nice to see how women help each other and to share the resources equitably among peer women. And like she says in this quote, it results to a stronger sense of women helping each other, which I think is very beautiful. Next one, please. Like I said before, we do the due diligence up front, like we trust the partners that we work with for a long time. And we believe that also can reduce risks of fraud and losing money. And we can see in the magazine that limited amounts of money can go very far, that they can have enormous effects. And in the end, we can ask ourselves, what would cost more if you would set up a whole system of control, of due diligence, of proposals, reports, expensive consultants to do evaluations, or you put more trust in people? And even if one of the projects would have failed, or the money would not have been spent, or anything else, it would still not cost as much as putting up this whole structure of control, we believe. And there is academic research that shows that this type of funding based on trust is actually efficient in the long run. Next one. Of course, there were also a couple of challenges, which were mostly from banks in the different countries, who really wanted to see a contract and a proposal, because otherwise they would be afraid that it would be spent on terrorist activities. So it should fit their anti-terrorism policies. We had to adjust our administrative process at both ends a little bit, but in the end that worked out well. And one big challenge, of course, is still the security issues of the partner organizations and the women in the communities, because they face a lot of violence and are in serious danger. Some of them we cannot even mention in the magazine. We showed some text and some pictures where we cannot recognize them in order to also show their stories. But this is really a thing that everyone should be well aware of. Next one, please. So that I have to round up, I think, but I have 2 more slides. There are some messages that we heard from our partners to the donor organizations and foundations, and they are saying that another type of funding and partnership is possible, as is shown by Dare to Trust. And it is very impactful. Like the money that they spend, they still see the results and they still see the fruits of the work. And they hope that more funders will engage in this type of funding. Next one. So our conclusion of both ends and our partners is that we hope more foundations will take up this trust-based finance, because it can be done effectively and efficiently. It creates impact. It increases impact, sorry. It reduces power imbalances, and it leads to progress that we want. So I will leave it at that for now. Annelieke?
Yes, great. Thank you so much, Maaike, for this very clear overview of the outcomes and the lessons that we learned. And indeed, we were so impressed by what the 14 partners in this initiative were able to do and come up with also in terms of the reporting. There was one quick question in the chat on what was the size of the grants that we provided. Maybe you can share that.
Okay, yes, it was 25,000 euros for each partner, plus 1,650 euros for the reporting back. So it's a very small amount. Please keep that in mind if you read the stories in the magazine, so you can see how much people can do with these small amounts.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Great. Thank you so much, Maaike. And yeah, as I said, we were really impressed with all the partners and what they were able to do. And we're very happy to have 2 of them in this call, which are Cheryl Palutan and Angela Cuenca from the Philippines and Bolivia. And they can share with us firsthand how they experienced this Dare to Trust initiative. So considering time, I go quickly to our first presenter, which is Che. Che from the Philippines. She works for LILAC, the Purple Action for Indigenous Women's Rights. And she will share a bit more about her experiences and what their lessons learned were. So Che, can I give you the floor?
Hello, hi everyone. I'm Che, and as Annalike said, I am from the Philippines. I am with the LAPO Collective of Feminist, women's rights activists, and Indigenous women who are really working together to support and stand in solidarity with the Indigenous women's rights. So I think I have a slide. So yeah.
Yeah, we can put the slides up.
Yeah. Okay, so this was shown earlier, but yeah, this is actually LILAC. We're a very small collective, as I have mentioned. So when both ends reach out to us and discuss with us the Dare to Trust project, honestly, we were so surprised within this new partnership strategy. And there was even a lot of questions. Really, no reports and you know, it was really they reached out to us, and it was really we really appreciated the trust that was given to us. So when this was discussed to us, it was also a time for us to really reflect and really had a very um serious discussion within the collective, but also with the indigenous women, um because we really wanted to discuss which specific needs that we can also respond with, the needs of our partners, that we can effectively respond through the Dare to Trust project. Next slide, please. So there are two things that was really in our mind when we started the Dare to Trust project. First is that for us to be able to strengthen and sustain the partners communities web of care, or the support and protection mechanism of the indigenous women, environmental and human rights defenders that we work with, because when the Dare to Trust project was discussed to us, it was very timely because all of us, including Lila, were facing a lot of challenges in terms of the effect of the COVID-19 pandemic, but also it was the height of a lot of security and human rights issues here in our country. The second is really how we can maximize the project in terms of supporting the indigenous women human rights defenders in their work in the communities by providing resources and sustainable livelihood opportunities for the members. And this includes practices that ensure long-term economic stability. Next, please. So there were two communities that we actually reach out also to become part of the project. First is the Bukidnon Tribal Youth Ambassadors, or the BTYA. They are a organization, indigenous youth organization based in the southern part of the Philippines, who were organizing indigenous youth who are confronted with issues around land grabbing and commercial plantation. Second is the Bilig Dagiti Babae. It's a Tuwali indigenous women's group based in the northern part of the Philippines. We're also facing a lot of challenges around the impacts of a large-scale gold mining happening within their ancestral domain. So we already identified two communities, but we also reflected that, Lilac is also a collective of women human rights defenders, and we as a collective are also facing a lot of challenges, and it also includes around the needs that we don't have enough resources. So that's when the Lilac Banig and Breakfast, it's our own version of the Airbnb. Thus we call this Lilac BNB, which is a space for indigenous women human rights defenders and women activists and women human rights defenders in general to come together. So just briefly, I'll share to you the stories of the projects that we have implemented. First is with Bileg Dagiti Babaes. So Bileg actually, next slide please, decided that they would use the funds from the Dare to Trust project to distribute small agricultural support funds for the members of their organization. And this is to augment the financial gaps for farm inputs, particularly on corn farming. So as we all know, they are farmers, but they are confronted with the impacts of the mining operations in their community. So there are a lot of challenges around livelihood, so that they can also continue their campaigns as well as respond to the needs, because they were facing a lot of, they had a case, there was an existing case that also needs a lot of resources. Next is around the story of the Bukidnon Tribal Youth Ambassadors. Next slide, please. So they decided to put up a small store, or we call it here in the Philippines a sari-sari store, but it is a village convenience store, which became actually a community point of interest. It actually serve not only just the financial needs to fund the organization's campaign and activities, but the store was also became a venue for organizing the indigenous people in the community. You can read their stories further in the magazine, but one of the most remarkable or something that we really remembered when we asked them how was the project and how did it contribute to the strengthening of their organization. According to them, along the process of implementing the project, this project also contributed in the development in developing and strengthening the financial management capacity of the organization, because again they are young women and young men in this organization, and they were given funds. So they really, when we dared when we dared to trust them, they also developed things like around, we should be accountable and we should take care of the trust that Lilac and both ends gave to our organization. Lastly is with Lilac. So Lilac actually started the LBNB, next slide please, or the Lilac Banig and Breakfast. So Lilac Banig and Breakfast is actually here in the Philippines. It is a safe space where women gather to share stories, wisdom, and dream. It is not just a place to learn, but it has also become the sanctuary of sisterhood and a home for the indigenous women human rights defenders away from their home. It is considered as a place for them to take a break and breathe, as mentioned earlier by Maike. So I am actually here right now. So this is a space where we provide not only a space for them to learn and do learning sessions, but most of them are more comfortable to be here whenever they are here in the capital to do campaigns and advocacies. So this is what Nilak Banig and Breakfast is all about. Next slide, please. So actually, we just summed up some of the changes that really happened within the implementation of the Dare to Trust project. First is that the incomes, most especially for the women, the Tuwali women from DBPO, the Bilig Dagiti Babae, most of the income that they get from the project were actually maximized for emergency support for members of the organization. A portion of their income is really deliberately allocated and reserved for any emergency specifically around risk and threats that they're facing. So they would have funds that they can go to whenever there's a need for them to transport a woman or indigenous women human rights defender from their community who's facing risk and threats. Also, the most of the funds, because there's a lot of cases where health issues amongst indigenous women human rights defenders as well. So there were parts of it that were used to assist the income of these projects were used to assist some women members who are facing health issues, but also around mental health support for members. Bukidnon Tribal Youth Ambassadors, there were stories around, just gathering the young indigenous women human rights defenders so they can have discussions and exchanges, which actually supported also a lot of them to deal with their stress and mental health issues. But lastly is around also security support for members. So these are just some of the changes that has been where the project has contributed in the lives of our partners. Next slide, please.
Yes, and
But it was also,
if you could
yeah,
try,
I think,
no, yes, considering time.
yes, yeah, I am actually wrapping up now. This is around our reflections on this kind of partnership methodology. So first is that we really, through the Dare to Trust project, this project actually recognized the importance of collective care. It has also recognized the invaluable contribution to the community struggle. This also is a learning curve for Lilac to really recognize the importance of livelihood to support the indigenous human rights defenders and their organization. And lastly, in the last slide, is around the importance of transparency as well. Even if we dare to trust, but it really comes naturally that partners, when you trust them, they will really do their best to really take care of the trust. And lastly, the importance of accountability of the organization. So these are just from the Philippines, and thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thank you so much, Jay. That was really inspiring. And it's so great to see how much you have been able to do. And I just really love that scrapbook also. I think that's really, really great. And thanks everyone for your questions in the chat. I know there's some questions about research in terms of the added value of trust-based finance. And this is something we are collecting as BOVAN. So we can also share that after the webinar, and please also share any studies that you are aware of in the chat so we can collect those because I think it's a really important question. And there was also a question like, is there some kind of control from BOVANs on what could be supported? And that answer is no, it was completely open. It was really unconditional, so people could do what they wanted. And there was also a question on whether this is a one-off initiative. Well, it was at first, but obviously we love to continue doing this and have a continuation on Dare to Trust. So these are some first answers already to some of the questions, but I would love to go straight to Angela Cuenca, who's the coordinator of Colectivo Casa in Bolivia. And she will also share a little bit on their experiences with Dare to Trust. So Angela, over to you. And the slide will be put up.
Hola, hola, muchas gracias. Sí, sí me ayudan, por favor. Bueno, aprovecho de ganar el tiempo. Bueno, comentarles que esta iniciativa me causa mucha emoción, escuchar todos los logros, pero también para nosotros como colectivo. Para nosotras también ha sido una experiencia diferente, emocionante y muy querida, como también decían las compañeras de Bodens. Bueno, a ver, voy a empezar con esta primera diapositiva. Nosotros le hemos denominado a esta iniciativa Sembrando Sueños, Regando con Gotitas de Confianza. Bueno, yo soy Ángela Cuenca del colectivo Casa, una ONG en Bolivia con 17 años de trabajo acompañando a comunidades, organizaciones y particularmente a mujeres indígenas que defienden sus derechos sociales y ambientales. ¿Sí me ayudan con la próxima diapositiva, por favor? Estas mujeres están proponiendo alternativas de vida para hacerle frente a los problemas de contaminación minera y a los efectos de la crisis climática que está atravesando sus territorios, pero que también está atravesando su calidad de vida. Como pueden ver en las imágenes de arriba, esta es la zona en la que vivimos, una zona con alta contaminación, con muchos problemas de escasez de agua. Y entre las alternativas que se están buscando, aquí podemos ver la cosecha de agua, ¿no? Pero hay muchas otras iniciativas que venimos proponiendo en los territorios. Si podemos pasar, con mucha alegría, el año pasado Bodens nos seleccionó para atrevernos a confiar. Para nosotras fue un gran desafío disponer de recursos sin proyecto, con una responsabilidad de que el dinero sea utilizado de la mejor manera. Entonces, ¿qué es lo que hicimos? Lo primero que hicimos fue soñar con las mujeres defensoras de la Madre Tierra. Son hermanas de diferentes comunidades, son como 50 mujeres y organizamos talleres, ¿no? Para recoger las necesidades personales, las necesidades colectivas y también analizamos el contexto del país y lo que podía pasar, ¿no? Siempre presente en nosotras que se venía una crisis económica y que ya estábamos atravesando una crisis ambiental. Yo me pongo a pensar realmente en qué momento más oportuno llegó este proyecto, este apoyo, porque actualmente en Bolivia estamos viviendo una crisis impresionante con una devaluación del dinero y creo que el apoyo que nos han dado llegó en el momento perfecto. En estos espacios de confianza, nosotros todavía no hablamos de dinero, porque queríamos que salgan las necesidades, que veamos realmente cómo estamos, ¿no? Pero posteriormente organizamos otro espacio de confianza y ahí ya les comentamos que teníamos este apoyo económico, pero ya teníamos las necesidades recogidas. Para nosotras como institución era un desafío. ¿Y ahora cómo hacemos? ¿Cómo organizamos? Pero las mujeres rápidamente y de forma tan sencilla armaron un plan para mejorar las condiciones de vida, como pueden ver aquí en este cuadrito. Este plan compone varios aspectos, ¿no? Uno que es la salud, otro que es el fortalecimiento de la organización, la producción y también la economía, ¿no? Se generaron espacios muy lindos de discusión, de compartir, pero sobre todo de crear juntas. Si podemos pasar a la próxima diapositiva. En fortalecimiento organizativo, logramos que la capacitación desde la educación popular y los saberes de las mujeres sea reconocida con un título académico de técnico básico otorgado por el Ministerio de Educación. Entonces se invirtió en talleres, en reuniones, en intercambios y también en canastones con víveres para que las mujeres puedan compartir con sus familias, ¿no? Esa era una necesidad. Si podemos pasar a la próxima diapositiva. En salud. En salud realizamos intercambios de conocimientos sobre la medicina tradicional, espacios de salud emocional. Se organizaron botiquines con plantas medicinales de diferentes comunidades, pero también se analizó, ¿no? Si son solo las plantas medicinales o es también la atención en los hospitales. Entonces, una discusión muy linda y obviamente no se descartó esta necesidad. En cuanto a producción, se invirtió en semillas para huertos comunitarios, que son espacios donde todas trabajan y todas comparten la producción. Es un espacio de solidaridad frente a terrenos que no tienen agua, donde no se puede producir por la contaminación. Y también se construyó una carpa solar donde estamos produciendo sanamente, sin químicos y donde todo también es compartido, ¿no? Si podemos pasar a la siguiente diapositiva. Y por último, analizamos también economía. Entonces se soñó y se compró hornos y cocinas para 50 mujeres defensoras para que puedan usar en su casa, pero también para que tengan una herramienta para trabajar, ¿no? Entonces, ellas están actualmente cocinando, están vendiendo productos. La emoción tanto de las mujeres beneficiarias como para nosotras como institución es realmente indescriptible. ¿Qué hemos aprendido de toda esta experiencia? Primero, que para nosotras como institución, el Dare to Trust significó devolver la confianza que recibimos de Bodens, pero sobre todo se plasmó en inmensas satisfacciones, hacer lo que nunca pudimos hacer, apoyar a mujeres defensoras en sus necesidades de hogar, en la economía, en sus sueños, en la salud, ayudar a mujeres indígenas en algo personal y que les sirva para salir adelante como organización. Si podemos pasar a la siguiente diapositiva. También aprendimos que se puede soñar juntas, porque hay muchas necesidades en las comunidades y más aún para las mujeres, pero que nunca se atienden porque los proyectos tienen formatos limitantes, muchas veces fríos, y hasta nosotros como institución nos hemos acostumbrado a ello. Por eso ha sido un desafío el Dare to Trust. Lo que para nosotras era un desafío, para las mujeres defensoras fue tan fácil, porque ellas son administradoras del hogar. Rápidamente armaron este plan, identificaron cuáles son las condiciones de vida que quieren tener, qué necesidades tienen. Y en algún momento ellas se cuestionaban, pero ¿por qué voy a pedir una cocina que es familiar? Debería pedir una cosa que me sirva para trabajar. Entonces estuvo presente la reflexión de que nuestra familia, nuestro hogar también es un lugar importante en el que tenemos que invertir y desde el cual también podemos trabajar, ¿no? Entonces hubo una doble reflexión. También es importante destacar que las mujeres nunca van a pensar en cosas solo para ellas. Siempre están pensando en el bien colectivo, siempre lo van a hacer con solidaridad. Y esa es la experiencia que tenemos con mujeres indígenas en Bolivia. Miren, quería que vean esta fotito, que es la hermana primero soñando con la cocina y el momento que recibió la cocina, ¿no? Ha sido una experiencia muy linda. Para las mujeres indígenas, el Direct Trust ha significado esperanza, satisfacción, alegría, emoción. Y por ello hemos denominado a esta experiencia Sembrando Sueños, regando con gotitas de esperanza. Si podemos pasar a la próxima diapositiva. Nosotros sentimos que la confianza se multiplica. Queremos agradecer a Dance por confiar en nosotras. Nosotras confiamos en las mujeres y queremos invitar a ustedes como donantes, como fondos, como instituciones, también a sumarse a esta cadena de confianza, porque para construir un mundo mejor necesitamos más apoyos como este, que sean de confianza, que sean a largo plazo, en el que, aunque no querramos, siempre las mujeres también van a rendir cuentas, pero van a rendir cuentas desde su vivencia, desde su experiencia, desde su cariño, ¿no? Y realmente estamos muy agradecidas, emocionadas por esta experiencia y gracias otra vez a Bodens que se puedan seguir replicando estas iniciativas. Muchas gracias a todas.
Thank you so much, Angela. I just love this phrase of sowing dreams, watering with drops of hope. Really inspiring to hear that for the first time you could really start with the dreams and then afterwards think about the available funding. Really, really inspiring. We're in considering the lack of time, we have 20 minutes left, 22 minutes left. I would like to suggest to move to the second part of this webinar, which is looking more into also what are the barriers that funders might face in moving into this direction, because we do see also in the chat some funders saying like, well, we're really enthusiastic, we really want to, but you know, it's also very difficult. What about accountability? What about showing impact? What about restrictive tax laws in governments, which we also hear a lot from other funders. So on this, I will have a conversation with Marieke Rodenhuis. I already see you in the screen.
Hello.
Marieke is head of charities at the Dutch Postcode Lottery, and really happy that you could join us in this webinar. Bovens is happy to be one of the many beneficiaries of the Postcode Lottery for a number of years now, and because of the trust and the core support that you provided to Bovens, we were able to do this Dare to Trust pilot and other priorities that we otherwise couldn't have done. So Marieke, maybe you want to first introduce yourself a little bit further and share about the work of the Dutch Postcode Lottery and the role of trust-based finance in that.
Yes, thank you. So my name is Marieke Rodenhuis. I work for the Dutch Postcode Lottery. Thank you very much for all the experiences, especially the last two ones, because I really think it demonstrates what we already believe for 35 years, that trust-based funding is really how you create results in the end. I will put the link to some more information about our organization in the chat. Time-wise, that's more efficient. Many people might not know us. We are a big funder, but we get our money from a lottery. So that's why that explains the name of our organization. And we are very good at selling lottery tickets, and the lottery tickets make sure that we have enough money to, or never enough money, but that we have a lot of money to give to our charity partners. Last year, the Dutch Postcode Lottery donated 363 million euro to charities, and we do that on an annual basis. And each year, actually, we try to give more to charity. And from the start of the Postcode Lottery, the idea of trust-based funding has been to the core of our funding philosophy, which you can also find via the link that I shared in the chat. And that is because the founders of the Postcode Lottery, they worked in civil society organizations, and they felt that civil society organizations are an integral part of creating a better world, and that the best way that civil society society organizations can function is providing them with enough finance. So they figured out the lottery as a scheme to create a continuous funding stream for civil society organizations. And we've been doing that up until now. So the 80, the goal of the lottery, we have currently 147 long-term partners, as we call them. Both Ends is one of them. In the chat, I saw WWF and IUCN coming by. Who are also receiving an annual amount from us. So from the total amount of funding we do, our aim is to spend 80% in our long-term trust-based relationships. And this means in practice that all those organizations receive an annual unconditional grant ranging, we're big funders, so we give big amounts, ranging from 300,000 euros per year up until 15 million euros per year. And those grants that they receive on an annual basis, on the basis of a contract of 5 years, is unrestricted. So the organizations can spend the money on whatever they like. Then we have the 20% left. Those are more in one-time grants given. In the chat, I saw Hyper coming by. So they are an organization that have received a one-time grant from the Postcode Lottery. Those one-time grants often have a specific goal. For example, the grant Hyper received, they are, for example, spending a part of it in Bangladesh. And the flexibility there comes from that first, we don't tell organizations what they should apply for. It is completely free what they want to apply for if they want to apply for a one-time grant. And also during the execution, we tend to be very, very flexible if changes are needed along the way. Even if Hyper would have said, oh, you know, we sent you the proposal for Bangladesh, but now we're thinking maybe it is better that we do a project in Malawi. Often, if the argumentation is right, that is not a problem for us. And that is because we do our due diligence in such a way that we have trust in the organization, that all the money that flows through the organization is used towards creating the best impact. And once we have that trust, we want to give organizations maximum freedom in how they spend the funds.
Thanks. Great. Yeah, very flexible funder. And it's quite amazing, all this core funding, because, well, to be honest, like all the finance out there, most is still very project-based and very rigid, right? So,
and it's just to show, because we are part of the Postcode Lottery group, so there's even more Postcode Lotteries out there. In total, we give 900 million euros to charity per year, and most of that goes in trust-based relationships. So
right.
It is not only possible with small amounts.
Right. Yeah, and it's interesting because you already touched upon due diligence, so let's go into that later on a little bit.
Yeah.
But what would you say to a funder who's not so convinced yet? Like, why should I do this? Why would you say this has such key added value over project finance? Why is this so much better in your view?
Well, I think the stories of you and also earlier of Mike really illustrate that. I mean, solving the world's problems, let's say, to use big words, and I mean, it's so diverse. It's you cannot think of anything that is standard, let's say, or that's very difficult. So, and especially if you work abroad, like Both Ends does, with all these groups, all the contexts are so specific that actually only at the end of the chain, let's say, people really know what is needed. And that way, so that's the first thing. I think that the partners that we work with, we know how to sell lottery tickets, and the partners, that's always what we say. And our partners know what needs to be done to get the world in a better shape. So that's what you maximize, facilitate in a maximum way by providing flexible funding. And also what I personally think is a very big plus of flexible funding is the headspace it creates on either side of the table. So on our side and on your side and of your partners as well, because in this whole aid system, many people are just worried about, okay, so I sent a proposal for this, but now in practice, I need to do this. So how can I rephrase this or present this in such a way that it doesn't create a problem between me and my donor or stuff like that? And you take that away. And if the people that you work with can really work on the solutions that are needed in their context, and you can see it up till really in practice in the examples that were shared with us, that creates the best results, and you create the space for that.
Yeah, it saves time and energy on both sides, like you say. So what about due diligence? I mean, the boards or the legal and finance people in the funds might say, well, you know, how do we know the money is well spent? How do you do the due diligence?
Well, yeah. So for us, it is in that sense, we're in the luxury position that from the start of the lottery, the idea was to provide trust-based finance. So on our side, in our organization, I don't have a board that I need to convince of doing this because they are already 100% in, and we also don't face any big challenges in terms of tax regulations, as long as organizations are registered as a charity in the Netherlands. I have to say that. But besides that, there's not a lot of rules and regulations that we need to deal with, fortunately. So for us, it's our own due diligence that is most important. And in our due diligence, and I think that's also the basic thing for doing this, you need to find those pillars, let's say, of trust that you want to identify in your partners that will give you the comfort to be able to let go of the sense of control that you want to feel from a project proposal, for example. So for us, it is, we want to trust the whole organization. So we look at the pillars of what for us constitutes an organization that we can trust with our money. For us, that is a good governance, good strategy forming, good story on impact measurement, a good story on the track record, a good financial health of the organization, and a good story on diversified income streams so that they're not completely dependent on postcode lottery funding. So, and especially the internal checks and balances and control mechanisms. We want to have a good sense on how do you measure your progress and how do you control where your funding is going? What procedures do you have in place as an organization to detect fraud? And if you would detect fraud, how do you go about solving those issues? Because problems arise everywhere. So that's for us, and so the let's say the basic or the structure of the organization for us is very important, and also the trust relationship that you build along the way. So for continued relationships, that part is very important. And for us, in that, transparency is very important. That if there is a problem, if you detect a fraud, that you notify us and that you honestly tell us what's happened, what is the consequences, was our money involved, and how are you dealing with it? And if it's an open and transparent process and there's not something really terrible happening, then it doesn't need to be a problem in the relationship.
Yeah. So it's very similar to both ends, like what Micah was saying. You do the due diligence upfront, investing in the relationship and trusting each other. And also what we hear a lot is like, when one donor trusts an organization, maybe other donors can also trust. So the collaboration between funders could also be very, very interesting. And you mentioned about measuring impact, because that's also another question that funders have, right? So how do I know now, how can I measure what the impact of my funding is? And it's so scattered now with all this funding. How do you sort of measure that as a whole in terms of what you've been able to support?
Yeah, but that's I think for us, it's a matter of perspective. We don't want to measure our impact in, for example, number of human rights activists protected, or number of food aid people reached by food aid. That is not our impact. If we were to formulate it that way, our impact would be we have 147 partners that achieved the results that they promised us they would achieve.
Okay, you don't have your own KPIs.
No, we don't have our own KPIs, and we happily, because we provide unrestricted funding, so that's very convenient at times, because all the results of both ends are our results.
Great. Maybe a last question, and actually this question is also for everyone listening in this webinar. It's like, it feels like many of us joining this webinar are quite enthusiastic about trust-based finance, but how do we really make this grow, right? How do we convince others? How do we, as a funder, make sure that we cross these barriers that we see? And as maybe civil society organizations, how we spread the word or amplify this? What would you say? What potential do you see, or what do you think is still needing to be in place, like evidence or stories, or what is needed? And again, because of time, this is also a question I like to pose to everyone. So please in the chat, just share your thoughts on this so people can also see what others think.
Yeah, well, I know, you know, we all of us together have created this whole system of donors and receivers, and it, as well as that, the conditions on the in the field, let's say, like for example, what we saw in the Philippines or in Bolivia, are very different and context specific. I also think that on the funder side, they are very context specific, because it depends per funder what your possibilities are. If you live in a country, which was mentioned in the chat, that has a lot of tax rules and regulations, it's not that easy. If you have a board that's very traditional and feels very reluctant to do that, it is not that easy, even if you're working in the organization and wanting to do it more. If you're a funder from a government perspective with a whole parliament and stuff behind it, it's also it's a different situation from a philanthropic funder like ours that have a relatively big freedom to do with their funding what they feel. But I do feel that everyone can go and look for how they can give at least a little bit more trust and a little bit more flexibility. If you need to send a tax authority a proposal with KPIs and everything in it, but you could maybe work with your partner to first tell them, we plan to give you this amount, but you are completely free to write a proposal of what you want to put into it. Like you said, you started your work with the Dare to Trust initiative with organizations that you already work with for a long time, that you felt you could trust. That's a good first step. That we do our due diligence, and we give the flexible funding to organizations also that we have not worked with before. But that doesn't need to be like that. And even, you know, you don't need to put the 100% flexibility in from the start. Maybe you could start with, okay, maybe we won't put restrictions on the type of activity that people fund. Or if you're a bigger funder, we won't put any restriction on the country you want to be active in.
Yeah,
it's already a part of flexibility, and also changing the discussions you have with your partners, not focusing on where possible, not focusing on receipts and everything, but on the big picture.
Yeah.
What do you want to receive in the end?
Yeah. Is it just compliance, or
Yeah.
or more the conversation that you have and the lessons that you learn, and etc. Yeah. Yeah. And indeed, you can start slow, right?
But the important thing is to start and to get that comfort and to build the trust. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So we're posing this question also to all of you, and I think it's being translated in the chat as well in French and Spanish. So this is a question that we want to pose to all of you. What do you see as the potential to further implement as a funder, or advocate for as a civil society organization, for trust-based finance? And what do we need? What do we need? More resources? Do we need to collaborate more? Do we need to have another narrative, more evidence? It would be great to hear from you what your questions are when you think about this. And we will definitely collect all of that, because we have 5 more minutes left, but we will collect all of these thoughts and what has been discussed so far, and also share that back with all of you. So it would be great if you could share this in the chat. And also if you have another question maybe for Marike to ask, please also let us know. Maybe we can have 1 or 2 questions. I'm just looking at the questions. How to show the impact of trust-based funding without increasing reporting requirements. Yes. So what do we think? Is storytelling enough, right? So how do you see that in the funding space? Do you feel is that what's lacking, or?
For us, it is enough that we can say we support this organization, and well, because of our, not just because of our support, but because of the support this organization receives, they can achieve this for this target group. So when we don't want to claim the impact all for ourselves, but we focus on what our partner has achieved.
Yeah, exactly. So more coming in. I really want
And
to.
that's just to mention that, because sometimes people think that when you do trust-based and unearmarked funding, that you have no control. But of course, we talk to our partners with both ends. We have an evaluation every 5 years. In that evaluation, we ask, what are your goals as an organization for the coming 5 years? Then in the next evaluation, if you don't achieve the goals that you have told us ourselves that you will going to achieve in those 5 years, of course, we're going to have a conversation. But we don't ask, what will you specifically achieve with our money?
Yeah. And that's a good point. Like we need to demystify some of these things. Like there's no control and we have no idea what's happening, which is not true.
No.
You can actually. So yes, indeed. So thank you very much, Marike, for this. And there's also questions like, okay, what was this a 1-year initiative? What do we do? And can we join forces? And can we go to funding spaces together and maybe help each other? So I will now, for the last 2 minutes, give the floor back to Maaike to share a little bit about that, because obviously as both ends we have various ideas on that, and we really want to invite you also to share your thoughts, and we really want to work together because we really believe in this trust-based finance and to make sure that this is going to grow in the future, and especially now in the context we're in now with the whole sector under pressure and less funding available. So Maaike, maybe you can share in this last minutes of this webinar on how we intend to continue with this conversation, which is clearly not done yet.
Yes, so I want to briefly share with you the follow-up that we have thought of. If you have any more ideas or questions, please let us know. We are currently working on a fact sheet because we have had conversations with foundations and funders, and they asked a lot of questions, and we try to provide answers, but sometimes we also don't know. It's also a joint learning process. But what we have learned, we will put in this fact sheet, and then we can share this with other people, and it will be, really a work in progress. We can add to that along the way. We will be at a couple of events. First of all, the Philea event in June. There is a side event. There's a session which is called The Elephant at the Table, Round Tables on Power and Funding Practices. And we co-host the discussion table there. We will be at the New York Climate Week, and we will go to the meeting of EGA, which stands for Environmental Grantmakers Association, where we will also share our experiences and insights with Dare to Trust. We try to keep spreading our insights and amplifying the message. Soon there will be available a blog written by Karin in the Alliance magazine. This is the experience of both ends and Instituto Cordillera from Brazil. So they wrote this blog together. And we hopefully will have more meetings and webinars with funders and foundations where we can continue this conversation and discussion. So if you have any ideas or thoughts, or if you want to join us in these meetings or in these activities, please let us know. We are very open to collaboration. So if you have any ideas or questions, please contact Karin or me. Our emails are there on the slide. And this is it for now. I see a lot of comments and questions in the chat. unfortunately, there's no more time. We have to end this meeting. So let me thank you all for being here. Thank you especially Che and Angela for giving the presentations on behalf of your organization. And Marike, thank you for being here and sharing with us the experiences of MPL. We hope to see you again and to continue this conversation. But for now, have a nice rest of the day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye, everyone.
Great, you've been joining us. And let's be in touch.